Good evening, everybody. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the Park Inn. My name is Councillor Sean Davis. I'm leader of Telford Wrekin Council. Just before we get the meeting underway, clearly there is lots of media interest, rightly so, in this meeting. It is being recorded for members' benefit, and the meeting is also being live streamed on the Council's social media Twitter account. There will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for members of the public to ask any questions that they wish to give. That is going to be for members of the public. Clearly, councillors will be meeting in due course to discuss this issue, and councillors will have an opportunity to speak at that occasion. And there are also, of course, opportunities for the media, if you haven't already done so, to speak to members of the council, if you so wish. How I'm going to chair this meeting is that we're going to go through a report by the Director of Children's Services, Clive Jones, who will take us through the detail of that report. Members of the Cabinet and the two group opposition leaders who join us at Cabinet meetings will have an opportunity to contribute to the meeting. And then we will move to a decision in respect of the recommendations on the Cabinet report. First of all, can I just say from the Chair, there's been lots of discussions about what we disagree on here in Telford and Wrekin. But I think, talking on behalf of us all, I hope, there is a complete commitment, whichever way in which we do this in terms of an inquiry, that we do get to the bottom of the questions that remain unanswered. Questions that go back, in some cases, 20, 30 or 40 years, or even more recent questions. And the point of disagreement is the point of how we best get to that position. But I think we need to all ensure that we never lose sight that those people who live in Telford and Wrekin, who have lived in Telford and Wrekin for some time and will continue to live in Telford and Wrekin for some time, have a major interest in ensuring that we get this right for victims and survivors, and that any lessons that can be learned are learned, any resources that need to be diverted into support services or more measures will be done. And I hope that we don't lose sight of that throughout this meeting or indeed in coming meetings. I hope that we can all agree that this is not party political. This issue goes far beyond that, and I hope that we all can keep to that during today's meeting. So, as I said, what I will do is invite the Director of Children's Services, Clive Jones, to go through the report, and then I'll open up for questions. But before I do that, I do have to go through some formalities. We do have one apology from Councillor Ray Evans, if that can be recorded. Are there any declarations of interests? No. And then the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March, which was the last Cabinet meeting, I'd have a mover for those. I'll just sign those in due course. So, Clive, if you could take us through the report, Tackling Child Sexual Exploitation Together.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'm aware that there may be some victims and survivors in the room tonight, or listening into or viewing the screen that's going out. If following the meeting anyone requires support, advice and guidance, then please call our Family Connect team. There are posters around the room for those that are in the room with a telephone number on there, but the number is 01952 385 385. The team will be there tonight to take calls through until 7 o'clock. I should also say that the police can be called on 101, or if there's a crime being committed, a CSE crime being committed that people want to report, then obviously they can use 999. The purpose of the meeting tonight is for Cabinet members to receive an update on all the multi-agency work over the last 12 years in Telford and Wrekin to protect children and young people from sexual exploitation. The report also welcomes the Truth Project to Telford and encourages anyone having experience of child sexual exploitation, either as a victim, survivor, or as a parent, guardian, or friends, speaks of their experience to the Truth Project. The report details the continuous improvement through learning that has taken place over the last 12 years and restates the Council's commitment to making further investment into this key priority, in particular to support the Truth Project and to plan for increased demand for support that may arise as a result of increased publicity, public awareness of this awful crime. The report outlines the inquiry options and their relative advantages and disadvantages that could provide the answers that everyone is looking for in respect of historical child sexual abuse cases. This includes recent announcements from the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, ICSA, and the current position in regard to approaches made to the Home Office. The report suggests that a final decision is better made by an independent review after all this information is collated and a final decision about the National Inquiry has been made. The report contains 8 recommendations. Cabinet are asked to commission an independent agency responsible for developing best practice to come to Telford to do a health check of existing working relationships and practice in respect of CSE, child sexual exploitation, to agree the submission of a bid for central government funding and commit further council and police and crime commissioner resources to fund more frontline work supporting local victims and survivors, to welcome the Truth Project to Telford and commit council funding to enable it to be as effective as it can be whilst it is here, to consider the best way of providing answers for victims and survivors once the Truth Project has reported and ICSA and the Home Office have confirmed whether or not they will be holding a statutory inquiry. Right to the Minister for Transport to demand more work is done to follow best practice developed in Telford in regard to CSE in their licensing conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Clive. And just for the purposes of the meeting, the recommendations can be found at page 2 of the report from 2.1 to 2.8. So if I can bring in at this point Councillor Paul Waller.
Thank you, Leader. This report clearly lays out the work we've been doing and plan to do in the future. Can I start by saying that one victim of child sexual exploitation in the borough is one too many. We must listen to the victims and survivors of this vile and evil crime and continue to do everything we can to prevent this happening and to do all we can to tackle and charge the perpetrators. Those victims want their voices heard and rightly want answers. We must continue to learn from them to help partners to further improve our practice. Only a government-commissioned inquiry will be able to do this. We're pleased that Professor Jay has decided to bring the vital work with victims as part of the National Expert Independent Inquiry's Truth Project, which begins its work in Telford next month. It has the skills and resources to do this, and to do this as quickly as possible. Sadly, I cannot sit here tonight and say that child sexual exploitation is not happening. It's happening here just as it's happening in every town and city across the UK. We need to talk about it. We need to take action and share what we see and hear to protect our children and to help prosecute the evil perpetrators. Many victims don't realise what is happening to them or see themselves as actual victims. The perpetrators of the abuse are often clever and manipulative. Child sexual exploitation is everyone's business. We all need to look out for our children, look out for the signs, and tell someone. I appreciate this will be no consolation to victims, but we are tackling this issue. We are making progress. Last year, we invested a further £180,000 in our Kate team. Partners are currently working with 46 young people of both sexes who are at risk of child sexual exploitation to help prevent them becoming victims of the crime. Last year, our Kate team worked with 62 girls and 6 boys aged between 13 and 18 to prevent exactly this. The police's dedicated child sexual exploitation team has since 2016 arrested 56 people in Telford, resulting in 29 charges, with a number of these investigations still ongoing. Partners are working with young people, schools, youth clubs, hotels, pubs, clubs and taxi drivers to ensure their staff recognise the signs of child sexual exploitation and to report this so that police can act. The leader has already outlined why a council-led inquiry would not give victims and the public the answers they rightly want. A council-led inquiry would at least be half-baked with no powers to compel other organisations such as police, health, probation and the criminal justice system to take part. it risks just scratching the surface. That is why we need a full inquiry with statutory powers that this council does not have. I move the 8 recommendations on page 2 of this report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Watling. Councillor McClements.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome tonight's Cabinet meeting to discuss this very important issue. One of my other roles in the Cabinet is being the lead member on Telford and Wrekin, being a white ribbon town, which is a campaign against domestic abuse of women. And anyone who knows me will know how I feel about sexual abuse and exploitation, not only of women, but even more so of children and young people, whether female or male. With all the press and media coverage that has been focused on our town recently, it's important to understand what's happened over the past 12 years on the multi-agency work to protect children and young people. And I think it's important that everyone reads the background facts to this in item 4 of the Cabinet Papers, which I feel puts into context and gives a rationale why our child sex offences have increased significantly since 2014 due to the work of partners have taken to raise awareness and encourage reporting. For me and my Cabinet colleagues here tonight, it's paramount that the voice of the victims, whether historic or recent, is heard. They have to feel they are being listened to, and more importantly, that they are believed, and something can be done with this heinous crime against our children and young people. I am the ward councillor for Alston. When I was a teenager living in Alston, in my town of Wellington in the 1970s, no one understood about child sexual exploitation or was equipped to deal with it. Yes, it was going on back then, 40 years ago. At what level, I do not know, and I'm not sure anyone else knows either. But it has to be rooted out in our town, and it has to be rooted out right across the country. And I, together with my Cabinet colleagues, will do our utmost to be part of that action here in Telford. That's why I welcome the recent announcement that the Truth Project, which is one element of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, ICSA, that they will be coming to Telford next month. And I would encourage any victims, whether historic or recent, to come forward and have their voice heard. Now, there have been calls for a local inquiry, and I've raised my concerns about a Rotherham-style inquiry, as have many others. That inquiry was from 1997 to 2013. The big concern for me is that many of our victims are historic, going back to, as I said previously, 40 years plus, and a local non-statutory independent inquiry has no power to compel witnesses to come forward to give evidence unless they are current employees of the council. Therefore, prior to Telford and Wrekin Council being created in 1998, we could therefore not compel, say, Shropshire Council to come forward as witnesses. We could not compel the police, health agencies, GP practices and other agencies to give evidence. And under a local inquiry, this would not be under oath. For me, that's a massive, massive negative. How are we going to do justice to the victims if we are unable to demand evidence from those bodies? I think, therefore, it's important to see all the evidence at the end of the Truth Project, and hopefully it will prove the need for a statutory government-commissioned inquiry. If that is denied, then we will need to look at appointing an independent person and the option of a council-led independent inquiry, although I am still concerned that this will not give the victims the answers they deserve, especially for those historic cases going back 30, 40 years. We are not a council in denial. Yes, CSE has gone on in our town, and unfortunately still does. And I'm pleased that there is even more increased resources available to deal with this, as it's so important that we send a message to our residents that we are tackling this issue. And I therefore support the recommendation that the NWG is commissioned to work with the Kate team to undertake a health check of the existing partnership working arrangements. And as a leader says, and in finishing, I can't tell you how important it is that we all work together collectively on this issue, Everyone in this room here tonight and beyond feel it's important, that we do. And I support the recommendations put forward tonight. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Overton.
Thank you, Leader. We are clear that we and partners are keen to do is to protect children and young people from sexual exploitation within the borough in accordance with the key principles of protecting people. Listening to the voices of vulnerable people and maintaining public confidence in the work that the Council undertakes. The Council and its partners encourage anyone having experience of child sexual exploitation, either as a victim, survivor, as a parent or guardian, that they speak of their experience to the Truth Project. As someone who sits on the Community Safety Partnership with its aims of working together to make a difference, CSE was identified as one of its top 3 priorities. This strategy was supported at full Council and Cabinet just a couple of months ago. And as a safety partnership, we are clear that although Ofsted had recognised our multi-agency work, the CSP intelligence shows that this continues to be a challenge and an issue of concern for our community. We are clear that tackling CSE remains a local priority across agencies, as well as the Telford and Wrekin Safeguarding Children's Board and the Community Safety Partnership. Together, we are clear on the importance of ensuring that the community are part of the prevention against this type of abuse and crime. All agencies are focused on reducing the fear of this crime and enabling the community to identify and report it. And the CSP will report to enable the community of Telford and Wrekin, including those who work here, to have an awareness and understanding of CSE and its local context, feel they are able to report it to the police or the local authority, are assured that any identified offender will be dealt with robustly, and have a level of confidence in reporting CSE. We also have a robust approach to taxi licensing as well, as in Telford and Wrekin we have CSE training as part of the driver licensing scheme. Sadly, this is not done in neighbouring authorities, with some operators lawfully subcontracting bookings to operators from other areas. This, of course, creates difficulties. I did write to the Minister about having national standards in driver training to combat this, and we will, of course, chase this up. Of course, some of the stories we've heard in the national media seem to be historic in their nature, predating this administration and even predating the Borough Council. Some of the issues identified in the media talk about GP practices and other agencies around at the time having intelligence that this type of crime was occurring. Clearly, to make sure that those people, those agencies, those with that type of knowledge can be made to come forward and to give their evidence requires an inquiry with teeth. One that has a wider remit than one we could commission ourselves, and one that has the power to make those people give that evidence. We all need to understand the failures of the past. We have to do so so that this type of abuse doesn't happen again. And let's be clear, it is just not a Telford issue, so any learning must be shared. That is why we must have an independent inquiry. We don't want it to be seen as a closed shop or us marking our own work. And for the record, can I reiterate this as someone who has been subject to social media posts? This issue should be above party politics, as it is the victims that we should be focusing on, and the learning processes from them to make sure these awful criminal acts are stamped out, that no one has ever said there should not be an inquiry into CSE.
Thank you. Councillor Overton, if I can go to the group opposition leaders first. Councillor Reid, then Councillor Thomason. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman. Before commenting on a number of issues contained within the Cabinet report, I would like to recognise the dedication of members of Telford and Wrekin's Kate team for the work they've done with other agencies and their support as well of abuse victims. However, I now wish to deal with some of the issues raised within the administration's rather skimpy report, which was only hurriedly placed before us this morning. The first important issue is picked up at 4.2 and concerns Telford having the third highest rate of sexual offences at 2.6% per 10,000 population. The paragraph goes on to assert that this extremely high figure is due to the success of the borough working hard with victims and generally raising awareness within the borough. To state this to be, and I quote, "a measure of success is both dangerous and foolhardy. It is an assumption that the council cannot make because at the present time this administration simply does not know and has no way of knowing whether it is true or not. There is no proof that the two go together. It's like saying that instances of burglaries are high in Telford because we're good at raising awareness at housebreaking." Let me recite a headline quoted from the council's own scrutiny investigation, which was completed by councillors 2 years ago. And again, I quote, "The biggest problem is how many more cases are just not known about. Although we're now told that this was one of the so-called 2 independent reports into CSE in the borough, councillors were absolutely correct to be very concerned about this issue. Even 2 years on, we simply do not know, or I believe understand, the full extent of CSE issues within the borough. Far from being a measure of success, this is more a measure of don't know. What is more worrying, I do not see any desire by this council's administration to challenge this dangerous assumption or take fundamental steps to establish the true scale and nature of what we may be facing. The administration's report also seems to set great store by the conditions, as we've just heard, on local taxi drivers, and will write again to the Minister of Transport to adopt our safeguarding rules nationally. I think that's a very good idea. It's something that we should have pursued following the original letter. It is right to do that for obvious reasons. However, many of our taxi drivers, as you say, are registered by Shropshire and Wolverhampton councils, and it is essential that their conditions are brought into line with ours, something which, although simple, just hasn't been done. And we need to do more as an authority to secure that. However, the main issue facing us is that of a desperate need for an inquiry. I first called for an inquiry at a full council meeting in September 2016, following the publishing of the aforementioned scrutiny report and the Ofsted report, which had assessed children's services as requires improvement. For the sake of clarity, I will reiterate what I stated at that meeting. And again, I quote, "It is the assertion from scrutiny that the biggest problem is how many more cases are just not known about, which is both very true and very worrying in equal measure. It is this key issue which, along with others, that we need to completely understand. Specific issues relating to Telford need to be fully investigated, assessed and dealt with separately, but also in tandem with Professor Jay's current independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation. Political leadership is vital at junctures such as this, and was identified as missing at Rotherham and contributed hugely towards that authority's failure to fully protect children from sexual abuse. It is for these reasons that I call for an independent inquiry to be conducted into the whole issue of CSE in Telford and Wrekin, and I look to all members of this council to support this call." As I said, that is a quote from what I said at the meeting in September 2016. We made a second call for an independent inquiry in March 2017, after my group had placed a sum of £250,000 into our fully costed alternative budget proposals to cover the cost of such an independent inquiry. Once again, this call was ignored at both finance scrutiny and by the council's current administration at that full council meeting. Now, let me be very clear. I fully welcome the eventual U-turn by this council's current administration and also the pending arrival of the J Truth Commission. The Commission will at least offer a vital opportunity for victims and survivors to share their experiences and be respectfully heard and acknowledged. This will ultimately feed into the national inquiry and help them to make better understanding of the long-term impact of abuse and help make recommendations about support needs regarding institutional instances of CSE, such as schools, children's homes, etc. However, the Truth Commission is only one part of the J inquiry, and although it will eventually help inform the J inquiry's decision whether or not to visit Telford, this whole process will take a considerable time and may not report for several years. This brings us back again to the issue of a local independent inquiry, which we require now, not in 3 or 4 years' time. The advantages of using a non-statutory inquiry include greater flexibility to adopt processes and procedures and would allow terms of reference to be set independently of the Council. The presumption that such an inquiry would sit in public. The probability that such an inquiry would be completed within a shorter time period, contain less involvement of lawyers and with a subsequent saving of costs, and it would help form the terms of reference for the future J National Inquiry. Such an inquiry served Rotherham very well. If it is good enough for them, why does our community, the victims and survivors in Telford and Wrekin, not deserve the same level of recognition, respect and support? Although a local inquiry does not have the power, as has been said, to compel organisations or indeed individuals to give evidence, such absences will be open to the full glare of publicity and could later legally be compelled to give evidence to the National J Inquiry. The issue of ordering a local inquiry must not be one of cost, despite lurid front-page headlines at the weekend stating that according to Telford and Wrekin Council, such an inquiry would cost millions of pounds. That was an absolute lie. The Cabinet report before us now puts a figure of £350,000 to commission an independent inquiry, although I have to say that the cost to Rotherham was only £123,000. It makes our budget allocation of £250,000 look right, and at a time when its administration is spending £2 million on Telford's supposed 50th birthday party, the implications and the parallels there are there for all to see. Even so, despite costs, what price do we put on the future protection of our children in the borough? What price do we put on listening to and respecting the victims and survivors, both past and present, of CSE in the borough? What price do we put on acting decisively right now and announcing that the local inquiry will be put in place straight away? I personally do not want to hear any more excuses from this administration or indeed a rustle as they hide behind Professor Jay's skirts. I want this council to do the right, proper and decent thing and put in place an inquiry which will investigate past and present circumstances and guarantee victims and survivors alike the ability to give their evidence and experiences in private, with respect and decency. As has been said, this is not a party political issue, as I find myself in full agreement with the Rotherham Labour MP, Sarah Champion, who has also rightly stated that this authority should hold a local independent inquiry, while I find myself in full disagreement with the Conservative West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner. This administration must remember its stated principles of openness and honesty, fairness and respect. We're all elected councillors and corporate parents, and our guiding principles must be about justice and truth and serving the community. I remain at a complete loss as to why you have failed to commission a local independent inquiry 18 months ago and why you are failing to do so now. However, I give this personal promise. A change of administration at Telford and Wrekin Council will bring with it the immediate commissioning of a local independent inquiry. As a previous leader of this authority, that will include the role of myself and Cabinet members between 2007 and 2011, at the time of Operation Chalice. Collectively, we cannot continue to resist what is right and proper. We really, as a council, have to do the right thing. Now, if you're serious about this, and it says on the head of that report, working together, then take this opportunity, do the right thing, and put a local independent inquiry in place right away.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Thompson.
I'll be brief, Chair, because I think most has been said already. The most important thing that could come out of this is that victims are listened to, that victims feel that they can come forward and tell us what's happened in their lives, and that we can also try and prevent this happening in the first place. It's beholden upon us, particularly as opposition, to hold the administration to account on behalf of the public that are out there. The method about how we can hold that to account, I'm still undecided on. I've listened to what's been said in terms of holding a local inquiry without the powers, believe that we're being told. I really do welcome the J inquiry that we're told is coming. I think I'm thankful for officers who've pushed for this to come earlier than was being originally timetabled, as other authorities, well, I think, were further up the list than we were, and probably because of media coverage and everything else, let's be honest, it's been put further up the list. I really welcome this. If this can give those victims an independent way of saying how they feel about how they've been treated, both by ourselves and by the police, I really welcome that. I think all of us here realise that as a local authority with responsibility to the public, we have got to be seen, not just to be doing things well, but be seen to be doing things well, and people need to have confidence in us. To that degree, I would welcome an independent inquiry that isn't necessarily instigated by ourselves, because everybody can say, well, if you instigate an inquiry yourself, how can it be independent? I'm still considering that, but I really do welcome the Truth Project come in, which would then could feed into the later J inquiry. I also travelled on a train today and was chatting to a lady there who works for the council, and she was almost embarrassed to say that she works for the council, which I think is such a shame. I think for all those people that are working on this council and working with the police, who've erstwhile really worked hard to support those people as much as they can, they deserve our support. They can get caught up, if we're not careful, in the cross-party fire and the media coverage that can come on, and it can make them feel absolutely terrible. The vast majority, predominantly, are women who are doing this job, supporting these people, and they deserve our applause, the majority, who are doing this to their absolute topmost ability. And I'd like that to be recorded today. I welcome whatever comes out of this, and the most important of this is the support that's given to victims. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
Thank you, Leader. I can only reiterate my fellow members. This administration is absolutely committed to protecting the most vulnerable, and the voices of the victims and survivors must come first. As Cabinet Member for Education, I'm passionate about protecting and educating our young people. We run a very thorough safeguarding programme in our schools. This includes the groundbreaking Team Safeguarding Voice approach, which helps children understand the indicators of child sexual exploitation. We are committed to supporting crucial crew events with all youngsters. We've ensured all school staff and others, including practitioners from the police, mental health, school nurses, local colleges, health teams and the local authority have been able to receive CSE training delivered by many different dedicated trainers. We have also trained an additional 100 new designated safeguarding leads this year. All our schools receive support and advice from the police and health professionals to help deliver specific sessions on CSE, and the NSPCC deliver assemblies to all our primary schools. The crucial crew events for our Year 6 children are excellent and allow pupils to learn the dangers of social media at a very important transition time of their lives. They are taught about internet safety, about apps and privacy settings in a very clear, easy to understand manner. All Year 6 children attend, and there are many different workshops for children, such as workshops on healthy relationships and another on child abuse signs and how to report it. We use the Tell Someone campaign, which is a dedicated website to raise awareness of CSE across West Mercia for young people. Our schools also take an active participation in the CAPE panel, which is the Children Abused Through Exploitation. It meets every week and they contribute actively to the risk assessments. In my role, I see firsthand the results of projects like Working for Marcus, which is a safe and carefully structured SSE prevention and awareness programme, which is written and run by Loudmouth Education and Training. Loudmouth are safeguarding specialists. I attend this theatre in education performance and workshop, which is part of a holistic education package that includes young people's sessions and pre- and post-performance lesson plans, making sure that our youngsters are fully informed and professional help is available to them at any time and in any place. I'm fully committed to leaving no stone unturned, ensuring our current practices are as good as they could be and that we learn from others. A government-led inquiry is the most thorough and can compel other agencies and witnesses to attend. I cannot stress enough that if victims and survivors are able to, they tell their story. They deserve the chance to do so. And the Inquiry's Truth Project will give them that chance to do so. This inquiry has the expertise and the power to go back beyond 1998, something that is imperative if historic abuse and institutional failings dating back 40 years are to be investigated. Child sexual exploitation is everybody's business. We all need to look out for our children and any signs and tell somebody or report it immediately. We are committed to protecting the most vulnerable and ensuring the voices of the victims and survivors are heard. I therefore fully support this report.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Lee Carter.
Thank you, Leader. I guess I've thought about this and thought about why I got into politics in the first place. I did that primarily, and I think everyone at this level of politics does so because they're proud of their town. I'm proud of my town. I'm proud of Telford. I love this great town. I love representing the people of this great town, some of whom are in this room, some of whom I've grown up with. And this role has never really been about being a councillor, a cabinet member. It's not about titles, it's not about roles. They're meaningless. Actually, it's about being a good public servant, doing good public duty with honesty and humility. And throughout the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to find a word about this mixture of anger and sadness that I feel, and I think the community feels about what has gone on. And I've arrived at despair as being that word. Despair at the despicable crimes committed against members of our community. Despair for the victims and survivors, all of whom were children when those crimes were committed against them. I feel despair that our community now perhaps feels a little less safe than it should do, despite all of the work that I know is going on to make sure we do everything we can do to eradicate this horrible crime, but also deal with it when it does happen. I feel despair that some of the good work going on by social workers and our Kate team in particular is being overlooked because of some misleading statements about the effectiveness of their work. I feel despair that there are some suggesting an inquiry commissioned by the council will provide the answers that the community want, and it won't. I've heard Rotherham quoted, and if you look at Rotherham, in total there were about 6 different inquiries in Rotherham. And the last thing that we need to do now as a council is to have an angry and hurting community made to hurt even more and be even more angry because we followed a course that doesn't provide them with the answers that they want. But despair, I guess, is only a word. Now it has to be about action, and it needs to be about action. And I look at this report and actually what it says in this report, and I would urge everyone to look at what it says in this report. And firstly, I'm a pretty simple person. I judge things on their guiding principles. And the guiding principles in this report are set out. Those guiding principles are that it's paramount that the victims are heard, their voices are heard, and that they come first. And that we do what we can to maintain public confidence, and that we continue to do what we can to protect the most vulnerable in our community. And I'm pleased that this report sets those things out. The victims' voices must be heard. They must come first. And in respect of that, I look at this report and I see that we've put extra additional financial resource on top of extra additional financial resource over the last couple of years for ongoing support of victims for as long as they want it and need it. And I absolutely support that. I also welcome the National Inquiry Truth Project. Let's make no mistake about this, that is absolutely the best possible project we could have secured as a council to come to our town to allow each and every one of those victims to come forward in a confidential way and be supported throughout that process and afterwards. This work must be allowed to run free and thorough for the sake of victims and survivors. And then second is the work around maintaining public confidence and protecting our most vulnerable in the community. And again, the work of the national charity, the MWG, that is set out in the report to review these processes and procedures must be allowed to happen. There must be a review of what we're currently doing so that the public can have confidence that we're doing absolutely as much as we can. And I'm also pleased that there is more finance to support the excellent work of the Kate team. And I guess then there's the issue of the inquiry, and I've been bouncing this around. We've known for years as a council that the National Inquiry will come to Telford. Let's make no mistake that its scale, its size, the resources that it's got available to it, its powers, means that that will dwarf anything that our council can do. And that is agreed. And if you don't believe me, go and ask the MP for Telford. Ask her if she thinks that a local inquiry should still go on in Telford if the national inquiry comes to Telford. Ask her that question. I said earlier that I'm only interested in serving our community and doing my public duty in an honest and humble way. And I honestly have to say that the national inquiry, I perceive it to be the only way to get close to satisfying the public demand, which is basically they want to know what has gone on in this town over the last 40 years. I would finally say that there are some unwritten commitments in this as well from us as politicians responsible for running this town. And they shouldn't be any less important, actually. They're unspoken about, they're unwritten, but they shouldn't be any less important. First of all, that every day we are committed to tackling this issue with honesty and with absolute determination. And I want to make that guarantee and that pledge to people. That's exactly what we're doing. Secondly, that we will go wherever we need to in this borough to talk to people about what is going on, what has gone on, and how we intend to tackle it. And again, that is a pledge. Wherever we need to go, we will do that. The third thing is that we will not stop, and we must not stop, until the public are confident we are doing as much as we can. And finally, that we will never stop, absolutely never stop, until there is one person who feels at risk of this heinous crime or feels that we are not on their side. We will never stop, and we must never stop.
Thank you, Lee Carter. So I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak. What I wanted to do is go through the recommendations.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up a couple of points if I could.
Well, Councillor Reid, you've had an opportunity to speak. Everyone's had one opportunity to speak. There's a number of recommendations, and I wanted to give the ability.
I just wanted to take advantage over some of the comments that have been made since I spoke.
Well, what I wanted to do was go through the recommendations, and I wanted to give an opportunity for members of the public who are present to be able to speak. Obviously, we're going to have a full council meeting on the 10th of April. Councillors will have another opportunity to speak again at that meeting and discuss this further. I'm sure, I know, that this is not going to be the first and last time that this issue comes to the Cabinet floor. There'll be future meetings, no doubt, around this issue. So what I wanted to do
I think it's important we point out the limitations of the Truth Project at the moment, what it's doing here and reporting back to the J inquiry. That is not necessarily going to bring the J inquiry here, but you do need a combination of both inquiries to actually arrive at the answer. And the quick inquiry to get underway at the moment is a local independent inquiry.
Okay.
That could be done and that could feed into the J inquiry. We really have to try and get a grasp of this.
I think you made that point in your original submission. So what I wanted to just do is go through the recommendations for the benefit of people who are at home and those present. So the first recommendation, 2.1, is for the Cabinet to agree that the NWG is commissioned to work with the Kate team to undertake a health check of existing partnership working arrangements in respect of working to prevent child sexual exploitation in Telford and Wrekin and support those affected by it. That follows the Ofsted inspection, which described the work of the Kate team as very strong, and the support and the working arrangements for the partnership is very strong. It also follows the Home Office and the Department for Education's visit to Telford, and it also supports the letter that I received from the local government minister dated the 22nd of March, where there was a recognition from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, together with the Member of Parliament for Telford, Lucy Allen, that the work the recognition of that there was good practice now in place in Telford Wrekin Council as evidence, for example, in the 2016 Ofsted inspection of the Council's children's services, which singled out the Council's work in this area for praise. That's the letter from the local government minister. 2.2 is to delegate the authority to the relevant officers in conjunction with the relevant Cabinet member to submit a bid to the Government Trusted Relationship Fund to support the Council's continuing work in this area. And that's something that we'll be working with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office on. The 2.3 is for the Cabinet to agree further funding to be committed to commission partners in the voluntary sector to provide ongoing support to victims and survivors generally and those who come forward as a result of the work of the Truth Project. And this funding to be committed for an initial period of 2 years, but then reviewed after that. That will be additional support to victims and survivors on top of the support already offered in the community. 2.4 is to note and acknowledge the contribution of the Police and Crime Commissioner of an additional £70,000 for an initial period of 2 years to be match funded by Telford and Wrekin Council for the investment of 2 additional Kate workers, and that to take place as quickly as possible. 2.5 is to agree that the Cabinet should use funding to appoint a coordinator to ensure that the most effective liaison between the Council and the Truth Project can take place. And just on the National Drain Inquiry, they have not made a decision as yet whether or not they're going to come and do an institutional review in Telford and Wrekin. And my understanding is that they will use the evidence submitted to the Truth Project to make that decision. My call is very, very clear that I do believe that the National Inquiry, led by Professor Jay, should come and do an institutional review here in Telford and Wrekin and look at all institutions over a period of time that they feel appropriate. 2.5 is for Cabinet members to note the current position in regards to the National Inquiry, to support the Truth Project in any way that's possible, and to encourage victims and survivors to work with the Truth Project in that respect. 2.6, and this is important, I don't think this has been brought out enough in the Cabinet discussion, but following any decision by the National Inquiry to come to Telford or not, then the Council will commission an independent advisor to advise the Council on appropriate next steps. And that, of course, includes all options. And that would be at the conclusion of the Truth Project or at the conclusion of the National Inquiry visiting Telford. 2.7, for the Deputy Leader of the Council to write further to the Ministry of Transport on the issues around taxi licensing. And obviously then finally for Cabinet members to confirm that this report and all the appendices be circulated to all members prior to the Council meeting on the 10th of April. Is that proposed? Is that seconded? So all those in favour of that, those recommendations? Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, as promised, what I wanted to do is to open some conversations to the floor. Now, what I will say, as I said from the outset, that councillors will have an opportunity on the 10th of April to debate this issue, and at that meeting, members of the public will not be able to share their views at that point. So I think it's really important that members of the public are given that opportunity today. And as I've also said at the beginning, there's been arrangements with press in regards to their requests. So this really is an opportunity for members of the public to ask any questions or statements.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Craig Batley. I'm here with my wife, Angela, with other members of a global support group that we started called Telford Time for Change. This group has rapidly attracted the attention of some 8,000 followers in 2 weeks from 40 countries. What are our aims? To simply provide support to the existing victims and to provide awareness to prevent it in the future. Whilst it's very interesting what you've all said tonight, and I must congratulate Councillor Reid on a very good reply, there was very little said about what's been done for the victims now. What are the assurances you can give me, first of all, to say that there are systems and processes in place to look after the victims that exist now? And if they are so good, why have we helped no fewer than 6 in the last week, half of which have threatened to take their life because no one will listen to them? My second question that I'd like to put to you, councillors, is I would like you to address that those victims that have suffered from exploitation, who have then been penalised by having a criminal record of child prostitution, is absolutely absurd. And I would like assurances from this evening that we will look into, as a town, as local government, to ensure that these children, as they were, who were convicted of child prostitution under the age of 16 and other offences, seriously looked into, because this is very damaging
Thank you, Craig. Just on the issue of the support now, Clive, can you?
Well, the support currently in place, obviously if anybody came to Family Connect or through Family Connect and they required support, counselling support, then we would refer people to Access Consultancy to provide that support. We're always keen, though, to listen, to hear the views of people, and if I was aware of the views of the 6 people that had come forward, if we do have any gaps in those services, then in terms of the way we commission services, we'd always be looking to close those gaps down. We're not aware, I mean, if you come to Family Connect at the moment, we've got a range of support we can offer, including access, as I've already mentioned. If there are any gaps, though, we're always looking to close those gaps quite quickly. And I think we've got we are due to come and meet you, I think, at some point in the near future to talk through some of the work you've done so far.
That's right, just to confirm, to make you aware, from the victims that approached us, thank you very much for that response, the word trust. So I've heard the words honesty mentioned this evening. We need to have honesty, integrity and transparency, which I know we're all trying to do collaboratively, but trust is the key element. We've had victims come to us for the first time and provided us disclosure. I'm sure you all understand what disclosure is. From 15 and 20 years ago. That's unacceptable. Why? Why haven't they gone to the local police? And why haven't they come to the local agencies? I'm sure the agencies are great, but are they really connected? They say they're Family Connect. We're volunteers. Not one night this week, of me and my volunteers have been working tirelessly. We've gone to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning. We try to provide a stable platform on Facebook so people can feel safe to come in and voice their concerns. And they have. And some of the stories we hear are absolutely horrific. We're not getting paid a wage. We're not the corporate parents as you class yourselves as. We rely on you people to be as honest as what you're saying today, and not just because the cameras are here. Okay? We have children, we have grandchildren. It's unacceptable. The spotlight is on us, and we need to take this opportunity to work collaboratively and make the change. Because quite frankly, my fear is that when these cameras come back next to Telford, they'll be covering a story of a victim who's not been listened to, who's in a ditch or worse, in a coffin.
Thank you, Craig. Firstly, just to pick up your direct comments, as a father to a child in Telford, I absolutely share your passion in regards to this. I live in this town, as do everybody, every councillor in this room lives in this town, and therefore, if nothing else, we have a self-interest to ensure that our family are living in a town which has the right services and support. In terms of understanding what gaps there are, as Clive said, we're meeting you and your group very soon. I look forward to that meeting. And where there are gaps, if there are learning from elsewhere, further learning, we'll do that. If there are things that hasn't happened elsewhere in the country, we need to do that, we'll do that. But you know, there's nothing from me wanting to stop victims or survivors making disclosures at all. And I think there's a real opportunity as well of the J Inquiry through the Truth Project, for the first time ever acting as a truly independent organisation coming into the town to be able to do that, because I don't think that's happened up until this point. In terms of your second point, I know that there is a general campaign in respect of convictions, previous convictions of victims of child sexual exploitation. I understand the detail of that, and we'll pick that when we meet. But of course, that isn't a decision for the council, but it's certainly something that the council, either collectively or as administration, can join the voice of those people campaigning for that. I look forward to seeing you, Craig. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Rosie, thank you. Clive, could you pick up the points about the Kate team and under 13?
Well, anybody who referred into Family Connect would receive support and the right support. In terms of the age that we use at the moment, I think what I'd prefer to do is to take the question offline and talk to Rosie after the meeting, if that's possible, just to understand a bit more about what the issue is.
Okay. Paul, did you want to say something?
Yeah, wanted to pick up, Rosie. Thank you for your comments. We're working with primary schools to highlight the challenge of grooming with them, and you all know Team Safeguarding Voice. We're hoping what will happen with Team Safeguarding Voice as children go from primary school to senior school, that they will ask for a Team Safeguarding Voice in their senior schools as well. And we think it's really important that that happens. Team Safeguarding Voice is an approach that allows children to learn themselves about those issues and learn how to protect themselves about those issues. They use the NSPC in the children's, in the primary schools, they use the NSPCC PANTS campaign as a starting point for that. We would want to encourage all schools to continue that, and what I would suggest is that if you're interested in that at the Priory, we would love to look at a Team Safeguarding Voice in a secondary school in Telford. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Forgive me, I think you, if I'm not wrong, you remember the press?
Yes, my name is
As I said, Geraldine, sorry, as I said, there are opportunities for the press to be able to have interviews later on.
You said you showed that the Truth Project is coming to Telford, and that a decision will be made after that whether or not there is an institutional review of what's happened in Telford. The national inquiry is massive, the scope's so huge. This could take years, and how long are victims and survivors going to have to wait for answers? The point's been made about Rotherham. Rotherham had 2 inquiries. Rotherham had the J inquiry, and it's only after the findings of the J inquiry that the Secretary of State for Local Government commissioned the KC inquiry, which was a government-led inquiry. Why can't Telford and Wrekin commission their own inquiry, and then perhaps the government will see the need to commission a wider inquiry with a bigger scope? Why can't we do that now?
Okay, I think it's a fair point. I think that in respect of the council, we've commissioned an inquiry that was reported in 2013, which was, well, it wasn't the council, it was the Independent Safeguarding Board. I think that in terms of the national inquiry, we need to understand from them and also the Home Office at what point they're going to make their decision in terms of coming to Telford and do a wide institutional review. My concern is that the issues that have been reported in the Daily Mirror go back pre-1998. A lot of the cases, that was before this council existed, which means that we'd have to go to Shropshire Council. A lot of the issues that you've raised rightly in the paper relates to GP surgeries and police. A council inquiry wouldn't do that. I've read the Rotherham. I'm sure that you have too. But read the Rotherham report. Of those 15 recommendations made in the Rotherham report, all 15 have been implemented at this council, and therefore any further learning, if it needs to be done, will be done here. And I'll refer to paragraph 2.6. Which is about that independent advisor. We as administration don't rule anything out in terms of an effective inquiry. My view, and for what it is worth, is that we need an inquiry that does something more than past inquiries. An inquiry that for once and for all gives this town the answers that it needs to look at the police, to look at the council, to look at health services, to look at GP surgeries, to look at schools, look at pharmacies, a whole range, the whole spectrum over a long period of time. Otherwise, my concern is, as Councillor Carter said in his contribution, is that we get to the end of the council inquiry and there's still frustration, there's still anger, that we still haven't got the answers that people so desperately need. I think I'm seeing you after this meeting. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's David Goose. I was a councillor at Wrekin at the time this was happening, and I reported it to Westminster and Rotherham. CSO, and it took 14 months before a police officer come to take a statement of me. I had cameras in my house where activities were going on, and I've got all the paperwork there where I was due to go to court, Stafford, Shrewsbury, and my wife actually worked for
Thank you very much. And I think that underlines the point. Unfortunately, there is nobody from the police here today to answer that specific question. But I think that raises the point that there is any report, any future report, needs to be able to have the ability to look at the police as well. A lot of the issues that have come about have been about failures in the criminal justice system, failures within the police system, and a council inquiry wouldn't, I don't believe, would have that full scope or power to be able to look into that. It may very well be we end up with a council inquiry, and only time will tell in terms of what scope and what focus that has. But your question, if you wanted me to, sir, I could. If you wanted to leave your details, I'm more than happy to pass that on to the local police, ask them to contact you back to answer the particular question. Yvonne. Thank you. So to pick up the second point first, was that taxes?
All our drivers, when they come for a licence, that's private hire and Hackney carriages, have to do the CSE training. And that's why we're saying that the trouble with licensing at the moment is that operators can subcontract their hiring out. So a taxi firm in Telford could get somebody from Wolverhampton or Shrewsbury to do that who are licensed differently, and that's why we're lobbying the Minister there should be the same training across the board, that all taxi drivers have CSE training.
So this doesn't cover Shropshire Council as well?
No. Okay, and then to pick up your third point, Paul, do you want to pick that one? In regards to making sure parents are...
Yeah. Well, I can say, Yvonne, that parents would be welcome to discussing, if you go to the school where your children are at and they're involved with Team Safeguarding Voice, I'm sure the head teacher and the teachers would be happy to talk to you about the process and what they've gone through and how they've spoken about these issues. So please do that. I'm happy to pick that up with you after the meeting as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, forgive me, sorry. Okay, so I can pick that up probably. First of all, part of the Cabinet report, what we're seeing in other areas of the country where there has been the Truth Project or an increase in awareness, thankfully there has been more people coming forward to be able to explain what's happened to them. So we're going to increase the support of the Kate team to be able to support that. Clearly, by definition, the Truth Inquiry itself, the Truth Project itself, may very well have people coming forward for the first time potentially. We've done all we can, and we will continue to raise awareness in terms of people can speak to the Family Connect team, people can speak to the police. If they don't feel that they're able to speak to the council or to the police because they don't have trust and confidence in there, then there's obviously other mechanisms, including the Truth Project, to make those contact. But I think collectively, regardless of party political persuasion, there is a consensus here that the Truth Project has got a role in this, and we should encourage as many residents and people to work with the Truth Project as possible. In terms of the inquiries, there will be at some point, won't there, we'll know whether or not there's a Home Office inquiry, the Trade Inquiry comes to an institutional review, or this council does a further independent review. At some point that in the next couple of months, I would have thought that decision will be made. Clive, can I just put you on?
The ones that we know about, I think the last few weeks have moved incredibly quickly, and one of the things that's been mentioned tonight already is that additional resources will be put in to providing additional support, if you like, to support some of that. We recognise there's a need for support for the victims and survivors that are now coming forward. I think we also recognise the need to try and promote to all those people that are victims and survivors how to access that support. Initially, at this point in time, my advice would be to contact Family Connect 385 385 to actually have a conversation with our team, and we can then establish those support needs and ensure that everybody's put into the right, going in the right direction and gets the support that they actually need. As the leader's already said, I'm also aware that the Truth Project itself brings with it support and makes support available to people that come towards the Truth Project. Now, I'm not the Truth Project, I'm not ICSA at all, they're totally independent. I am aware there's going to be a lot of awareness raising over the next couple of weeks in that respect. So I think there's a number of ways that we can answer the question really. But if there's an immediate need and it's not being met by any of the groups that have been talked about already, then please contact Family Connect or come and talk to me personally afterwards and we can see what we can do.
Right, thank you very much. I'll therefore formally close the meeting. Thank you. Good evening.